So maybe we can just discuss the current leaning of academia towards the left, which you describe in various different perspectives. So one, there's a voter registration ratio chart that you have by department, which I think is interesting. Can you explain this chart, and can you explain what it shows?
Yeah. When I started at FIRE in 2001, I didn't take the viewpoint diversity issue as seriously. I thought it was just something that right-wingers complained about. But I really started to get what happens when you have a community with low viewpoint diversity. And actually, a lot of the research that I got most interested in was done in conjunction with the great Cass Sunstein, who writes a lot about group polarization. Because and the research on this is very strong, that essentially when you have groups with political diversity, and you can see this actually in judges, for example, it tends to produce, reliably more moderate, outcomes. Whereas groups that have low political diversity tend to sort of spiral off in their own direction. And when you have a supermajority of people from just one political perspective, that's a problem for the production of ideas. It creates a situation where there are sacred ideas. And when you look at some of the departments, I think the estimate from the Crimson is that Harvard has 3% conservatives. But when you look at different departments, there are elite departments that have literally no conservatives in them. And I think that's an unhealthy intellectual environment. The problem is definitely worse as you get more elite. We definitely see more cases of lefty professors getting canceled at less elite schools. It gets worse as you get down from the elite schools. That's where a lot of the 1/3 of attempts to get professors punished that are successful, do come from the right and largely from off-campus sources. And we spend a lot of time talking about that in the book as well. It's something that I do think is underappreciated. But when it comes to the low viewpoint diversity, it works out kind of like you'd expect to a degree. Economics is 4-1 or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's not as bad. But then when you start getting into some of the humanities, like there are departments that there are literally none.
Is there a good why did the university faculty administration move to the left?
Yeah. I don't love, and this is an argument that you'll sometimes run into on the left, just the argument that, people on the left are just smarter.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's interesting because at least the research as of 10 years ago was indicating that if you dig a little bit deeper into that, a lot of the people who do consider themselves on the left tend to be a little bit more libertarian. Mm-hmm. This is something that Pinker, wrote a fair amount about. The idea that we're just smarter is not an opinion I'm the least bit comfortable with. I do think that departments take on momentum when they become a place where you're like, wow, it'd be really unpleasant for me to work in this department if I'm the token conservative. And I think that takes on a life of its own. There are also departments where a lot of the ideology is kind of explicitly leftist. You look at education schools, a lot of the stuff that is actually left over from what is correctly called critical race theory is present, and you end up having that in a number of the departments. And it would be very strange to be in many departments, a conservative social worker professor. I'm sure they exist, but there's a lot of pressure to shut up if you are.